Introduction slide. The Teaching Assistant Program of 2022 Closing Plenary, featuring the following panelists: Ken Yasuhara, Director and Instructional Consultant for the Office for the Advancement of Engineering, Teaching, and Learning, as well as Natasha Fu Kuhn, Director and Counseling Psychologist of Husky Health and Wellbeing. This program is brought to you by the University of Washington Center for Teaching and Learning.
It wraps up the prepared slides. I wonder if we can we still have a few minutes. I wonder if we can address some of these other questions. I think we partially addressed some of them. The top voted one is about providing kind of extended or continuous support for a student without overextending myself as a TA. My hope is that options like the student care report illustrate that kind of plugs that student in, or makes them available, makes available to them a number of resources, because it can coordinate reports from various other parties, right? If from instructors in other courses, follow up, things like that. So, Natasha, I don't know if there's anything you want to add about sort of the continuity of care for a student in trouble.
Yeah, so maybe a couple of things that I want to add here is that all of us have a capacity for self-healing, right? And really what counseling is about jumpstarting that capacity that you have within yourself. And it's not just counseling that jumpstarts that. Just having someone who cares, feeling like you're not alone in a situation, helps jumpstart that self-healing ability. So in terms of thinking about what's your lane versus like what's the lane of like somebody else, your lane is to be caring, right? To say to the student, hey, I care about you, and I want to hear what's happening in your life. But what's outside of my lane is if you need treatment, right? If you need counseling, then I want to refer you to someone else. Or if you need, something in terms of financial resources, let me get you to the right people who know more about this, like financial aid office or the emergency aid folks, for example, and they can help you with that. So those, I would say that's how you might think about what feels within your boundaries and then what should be somebody else's. And I'm just want to be aware that we want to be thinking about leaving enough time at the end for Katie as well. Ken, do you want to pull out some of the most upvoted questions and I'll try to address those?
Sure, yeah. So maybe a couple of related questions. There's a follow-up about the slide on mandatory reporting. I guess there's a student asking about, a TA asking about what might be an appropriate response if a student does not just talk about suicide, but appears to have a specific plan. If we're not mandatory reporters in that situation, how might we respond?
If a student tells you that they have a specific plan, I would be concerned about them, and I would actually, you have a couple options. You can bring them to the counseling center. You can actually just walk them over. We're open 8 to 5, and you can bring them in to say, I'm worried about the student. And so that is always an option. Or you can tell the student, please go to the counseling center now. And, once you get there, send me a message to let me know that you got there, or you can walk them over yourself, whatever works for you. Because if somebody has a plan that increases their risk of dying by suicide, so I would want for us to act quickly at that point. And I would not submit a care report because that takes more time. There does get to be a point where we do want to have a welfare check, and this is where you might ask for a mobile crisis response, so that a mental health worker is part of the folks who respond checking in on someone. And that particularly comes in if a student had told you they were suicidal and then they don't show up for class, or right, there are things that you expected them to be there and they aren't there. We might want to check in with them, and they're not responding to, like, you emailing them, or if you have their phone number, if you were able to call, like, right, and if they're not responding at all, I would want to check on that. So one of the things we're working on, there's a couple questions that are coming in the chat. We are working on a handout for you that gives you, here are the things that you might notice in students, and then here's what you should do with it. And it's not quite ready to go yet, but once it's ready, I will share it with the Center for Teaching and Learning, as well as with academic departments. So you should, that should reach you one way or another to help you remember some of these resources. I know it's a lot to learn when you first got here, and we don't expect you to remember all of it. That's why we gave you a handout for today, but we will also be creating a new, well, we are working on a new one that we will be sending back. We will be sending out to departments and to the Center for Teaching and Learning for distribution.
Natasha, is it fair to say, though, that during business hours that a call to Safe Campus is a pretty reliable place to start with almost
Absolutely.
any situation? And
Yes.
then a manager consult for after hours through CareLink.
Absolutely.
So those folks have a pretty comprehensive knowledge of what resources are available, university affiliated and otherwise. So that I think if you're going to remember one thing, that might be to, most of the time, I think Safe Campus will be a good place to start. If we have time for one more, there are at least a few folks asking about strategies for responding to a student who is refusing or uninterested or otherwise not, doesn't seem inclined to seek out or connect with a resource that you're offering.
So this is where I might suggest Let's Talk. A lot of times what we found is that students who say no to counseling will say yes to Let's Talk. Another option would be to ask them, if you're not interested right now, that is your choice. But my question for you is, what would you say would be a point when you should ask for help, right? So you're getting the student to think for themselves. When would they actually want to, for them, it's enough of red flag. And then you can engage with them around that to say, my experience is that, let's say they tell you, if I'm no longer able to get out of bed, that's when I'll call someone, right? Because I'm that depressed. And we might say to them, at that point, my experience is that it's better to address something when it's small, it's relatively small and easier to fix, rather than wait until it gets really bad. And then it's a lot harder to address it. So if you're no longer getting out of bed, that's pretty severely depressed. I would recommend that you move that a little bit earlier if you can, right? You can have a conversation with them around it. There is a question around shame that I'm going to try to squeeze in real quick. The piece around not making the student feel shamed is if the student feels that you care about them and you're saying, hey, thank you so much for sharing this with me. I want to make sure you get to the right resource. And so I want to share with you that counseling is an option, for example. Typically students respond well to that. What they don't respond well to is if you say, they tell you their thing, and the first thing you say, okay, I'm going to send you to the counseling center, right? Because then they feel like you don't want to deal with them and you've pushed them out the door. But if they feel that, hey, I care about you and I want to get you to the right place, that tends to be helpful. So I will stop with that and let Katie wrap up.
Yeah, thanks very much. I just want to remind you, we will be posting these slides as well this evening. I'll make sure those slides are available, and then we'll follow up with with some of the questions we weren't able to get to. We'll save those and follow up that way as well.
Thank you so much, Ken and Natasha, for generously sharing your expertise and care, tackling such an important topic in a short amount of time. I hope, I know we're in a webinar, so we don't have reactions or emojis, but I hope you'll all join me in giving them some thanks and gratitude. And Ken and Natasha, I can let you sign off now while we just wrap up some things from the TA program. This session, as with all of our sessions, is just an introduction to help you get started as you embark on your teaching journey at UW. We hope that you'll return to these resources again and again. And now, as we are concluding the TA program, we would love your feedback on this session and the program overall, especially all of the synchronous sessions. I have put a link to this in chat, and even if you only attended 1 or 2 sessions today, we'd love to hear your thoughts. We do make changes to our program every year based on recommendations from TA participants, so we would love to hear about your experiences this year. And then this concludes our synchronous portions of the 2022 TA program, but our Canvas workshops are available to you throughout the year. And we strongly encourage you to explore and take a little bit of time with these now while you have a little bit of dedicated time carved out for your TA work. Many questions that folks asked about teaching in the morning session are answered in these, what to do in particular challenging moments. We have a Canvas site dedicated to that, for example. So we have, if you registered for those, you will have received a notification in your UW email account with a link to access them. And if you're having any trouble at all, please feel free to email us at teaching@uw.edu. And finally, thank you so much for your engagement and presence here. We totally acknowledge that orientations are, by their very nature, challenging. It's just way too much information when you already have so much else on your mind. So please take time to reflect and process, reach out to each other and your colleagues, and remember that you are part of the teaching community here at UW. This is an ongoing journey and just at the very beginning. You'll have other opportunities to engage with us throughout the year. And we also have a great slate of workshops on various teaching topics where you can connect with us. And I'm going to put a link to those in chat if you're interested in learning more or working more with us in CTL throughout the year. And finally, again, thank you all so much. We'd love, please take a moment to fill out the feedback form. And we wish you really all the best with your teaching this year. Thanks, everyone.
Closing slide. This concludes our program. Thank you. Learn more at https://teaching.washington.edu/. This program was brought to you by the University of Washington Center for Teaching and Learning.